top to bottom. And then as he does successive reps, there's several more things that we typically don't want to see. Now, one, he has elbow sleeves and a belt on for a weight that normally would be less than 50% of his deadlift, which elbow sleeves maybe to keep his arms warm, but not necessarily needed for a deadlift. A belt can be at heavier lifts, but I like people to learn how to brace their core properly without it. But as he stands up, what happens is, he's going to pull the bar around the knees, and he does a pretty good job of not moving his back as he's doing it, but as he stands up, then his back straightens out. So even from this angle here where it's rounded to straight, that's movement that we don't necessarily want to see. Now, the next error comes when, as he's coming down, the first thing he does is bends the knees. What this does is it turns on your quad muscles, which are kind of in the front, and it limits the amount of kind of glute and hamstring activity that you get to use in this position. And so when you load the quads up, there's a mechanism in the body that, when the primary mover, the agonist muscle is on its antagonist, or in this case, kind of the hamstrings, tends to kind of turn off a little bit. But we want the opposite. We want his glutes and hamstrings to work and not as much the quads, even though they do help. And then the bar kind of has to loop around the knee. And then now in this position, he's a little bit better here, but then he sits down. And again, what this does is it makes the quads right here work overtime. Now his glutes are still working pretty good, but the hamstrings pretty much aren't really doing much at this point. And so as he's coming up, let's see if I can get it. Again, he's got it's pretty much a quad drive. I told him, I said, if the barbell was on his shoulders, it's really not a bad squat position if the bar was on his shoulders. But for a deadlift, we want to see quite a bit more hamstrings. And then the bar is going to come up. Now his bar path on this isn't bad. He gets his knees out of the way. But again, as he stands up, his back straightens, and then there's that early knee bend. So there's too many kind of back and forth movements going on this. And so, I talked to him. We kind of explained the Romanian deadlift and the importance of that hip hinge. And I didn't want him to do any weight or anything until he had, kind of verified with me that he was able to get that hip hinge, because, we want to see a lot more glutes and hamstring activity, and that'll actually protect his back. And so this week he did only some RDLs and a few other things, to kind of practice that hip hinge. And so in doing so, he told me already, just with an empty barbell, his hamstrings were more sore than they had been on any other deadlift day. And so that's indication that he was using his glutes and hamstrings and not his quads as much. And so now if I move this deadlift example, and this is one that this is actually, myself, it's about 225 pounds. My max ever is in the 450 range, so it's not a heavy weight, but again, a lot more posterior, glutes and hamstrings are engaged. Shoulders are still kind of over the bar a little bit. If this was a really, really heavy weight, you might load into it a little bit more. But as I progress through these reps, touch and go, very much a lot of hip hinging. So from here, coming down, butt goes way back, bar path is straight down. Once it crosses the knees, that's my cue to sit down on it. So that way, again, we're using mostly glutes and hamstrings, a little bit of quads in there too, but for the most part, we're protecting that lower back. Even though it looks like I'm kind of bending over, the hamstrings are like loading a slingshot. So they're very tight, tense. What I'm trying to do is make sure that these muscles right here are doing the work. This one's supporting. My back is nice and flat, core is engaged. And then as I come up, I just simply squeeze my glutes, hamstrings, and lock out. I'm not trying to overextend. Sometimes people want to overextend on the lockout, but notice there's no change in that back movement. Even as I stand up, there's no rounding up or down in that back. So again, on this is just an example of some repeat deadlifts, but even in this position here versus this one, let's see, he's coming down here. So as he loads up, so just a big difference in that angle. But again, this is exactly why you would want to typically hire a coach or find somebody that can help you with your lifts. Even if you plan on lifting at home, or if you're going to lift in a local gym, if you're going to be at something where you don't have somebody to assist and help you, even hiring a trainer or a coach for a one-on-one session, say, hey, I want to deadlift, or I want to learn how to deadlift or bench better or squat better. Even sometimes 1 hour with the coach to pick out some of these things can save you a lot of trouble when it comes to, the potential for a strain or an injury, because, it doesn't require heavy weights to get stronger, but it does require good technique to be able to do it without the fear of something going wrong. And so, again, this is just one example of a deadlift. My staff, myself and my other staff, we're all very good at picking out some of these things. And so if you have any questions, or if you want us to kind of help you with your lifts, please let us know.